We are now going to take a look at how to add in the refrigerant banking. We're going to look at things like the refrigerant cylinders and aligning those cylinders with the bank. So we call that sort of the bank and bottle. Just think this is refrigerant storage. And so to get onto refrigerant storage, we're going to come from our login screen. And we're going to go then under our inventory tab again. And we had before looked at adding in new refrigeration HVAC equipment. This is where we go to actually add in the sort of stored refrigerant. Now, the stored refrigerant, it could live in a place like a warehouse. It could live on a tech's truck. That location is not massively critical. You can indicate that I got some stored refrigerant in the warehouse and a truck and various places. There's no limitation as far as the amount of banks and bottles you can add. So the refrigerant storage, you can use this, as needed. So the first thing to do under the refrigerant sort of inventory and adding in, let's say, a new bank, and once we create a bank, we can add in a bottle, is going ahead and first, choosing our company we're going to add this against, which you see I just did. From here, I want to go ahead then under this bank area and add a bottle. Because what we'll do is we'll align the bottles against the banks. So first, to do this in terms of adding in our sort of stored refrigerant, let's create a bank. Let's say we're going to have a 407A bank. Let's call this guy, maybe it's R407A, new bank, and let's call this June, 2022. Let's go ahead and save. We could add in information in the description area. Let's go ahead and just add this bank as is. Okay. So underneath our bank area, we see we've got a number of banks that we've set up, but here is this new R407A, and I call it a new bank. Now, if you needed to adjust the names on this guy, again, clicking on this little guy, it looks like a piece of paper with a pencil. This will allow you to make, any adjustments here. Okay, so we set up our bank. Let's go ahead and add the bottles in. So to add the bottles, we'll click on the bottle. The next thing we'll need to do is go ahead then and then align the bank that those bottles are going to live against. So let's just say he's going to be a 407A bottle. We're going to add in, let's say maybe we add in a couple of bottles here. We'll call this guy like maybe. And if we had a reference, we could add an additional reference here under reference 2. This is important to align which bank this bottle is part of. So we'll say he's part of this R407A bank. And then the refrigerant type, again, adding in the R dash value should get us into the right refrigerant. We'll want to choose the 407A. And then we can adjust the full charge and the current charge size. So these could differ. They could be exactly the same. This is something that's flexible. So like once you add the full charge and the current size in there, you can actually adjust these as needed. I'll show you that here in a sec. So if you needed to adjust them for some reason, you don't have to wait to sort of add usage events to get that number to sort of jive. You can actually do some adjustments directly inside of here. Okay. Let's go ahead and set up our bottle here. We could say, all right, what's the full charge size? Maybe he holds 100 pounds. What's the current charge? So we're going to say he holds 50 pounds. Again, anything with an asterisk in any of these fields, these guys are all required items. We can indicate if this is a refillable cylinder or bottle. Right here now, it does say, no. Let's change this and say yes. And then the date that was added, we'll say, all right, for ease, we'll leave it with today's date. Let's go ahead and add in our first bottle. Okay, so we add in our bottle here under the bank, and we see that under the inventory for the bank, we'll see that pop up that here's our capacity. So if I were to come back in here to the bottle area and say, I want to go ahead, let's add in a second bottle. So we can add in multiple bottles. We could add in just the one bottle at a time, or let's say we had a number of bottles to add. You can add them all, at one shot, sort of by clicking on this sort of add new and then adding them individually. Let's click on add new. Let's just say this is maybe bottle 2. And again, we want to align all the information and say, all right, this is going to be the 407A, June 2022 bank, and then the refrigerant type. And we see I'm adding in the R407A. And then what's the full charge size? Maybe again, we'll say this guy is holding a total of maybe 125 pounds, and maybe he has just current charge size of maybe 40 pounds, let's say. Okay. And we'll also come in here and we'll say, yes, refillable. Okay. Date added, same bit. We'll leave it with today's date. Okay. So if I go ahead and I hit save, we go ahead and we see underneath our bank here, we have these two bottles. So what should happen is that those total capacities under the bank itself will kind of adjust, and we'll see that here is our, sort of total capacity. Again, if I needed to make adjustments to each of these bottle holdings, I could do that right here. This is without, making any further adjustments. If I come in and I say, all right, one here in the bank, and I said, this guy that's holding 40 pounds, when I first entered him, that's not right. I need to adjust him right away. So there's some real-time adjustments that you can do if needed. Let's just say maybe he's holding 50 pounds like the other guy. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and let's hit save. All right, so there's our real-time adjustment. The important thing with this stored refrigerant is that you can start to pull from this stored refrigerant under the usage area. So once you have this aligned sort of bottle with the aligned sort of banks, when you come into the record event area, you can actually pull from that. So you can, real time kind of add in, more bottles, add in more banks, and then, sort of pull from those bottles under the record event area. So this allows you to kind of, say that I'm going to be pulling refrigerant from my own, sort of supply versus maybe an external supply. So what would that look like if we were to come into the record event area and I come back into my EPA company like we've got? We could choose our region and our site. Let's say I come in to add refrigerant. Let's go in here. Let's see if we got any 407A systems here. So if I were to do that here, I could say, if I'm looking for something that's holding, the 407A, we could see under here that we could go ahead and add the gas from our, sort of supply stock. And we see here under this site too, all right, sure enough, I've got this little Toshiba unit. I see he's holding 407A. If I were to come in here under the record event area, and this is sort of like step 2. We've added our banks and bottles, but what does it look like in terms of adding in our refrigerant, sort of pulling it from that bottle? Same bit as we looked at for sort of adding usage events, and we'll get into a bit later. We'll go ahead and click on company region and site, clicking on add refrigerant. We're going to choose then the equipment that we've got. Go ahead and put next. And then we'll go ahead and click on the add refrigerant. And looking at that, I'd say maybe I'm going to just add in like 3 pounds of refrigerant here from my bottle. Now, when we get into the refrigerant source, this is where those banked and sort of saved refrigerant kind of comes into play and from our owner stock. So if I were to say, hey, this is going to be coming in, from a certain bank, this right here is where that alignment would take place. So we added in that other bank that was aligned with a different company. In this case, we could say same kind of bit that I want to add in a refrigerant from this bottle here, this bottle 1407A. Similar process. Anytime you create a bank and you add in a bottle, you're going to have the ability to pull from it. So that's what we're going to do here. And say, all right, how much is used out of here? I'm going to say I'm going to use 3 pounds. So when we do that, what happens is those inventory values in that bottles and banks area, they adjust automatically. So we go ahead and we're saying, all right, I'm going to pull refrigerant from the bottle, and I'm just going to hit save. And let's go ahead and let's confirm. So that's how I would go to actually step through part 2 after we add in, that stored refrigerant. What does it look like when we're going to go ahead and actually add a usage event? And that, anytime you have a usage on an event, you can pull from that track refrigerant. It's not just singly underneath here as a simple sort of add refrigerant. If you're in any part of the tracking site where you're doing an add refrigerant in any of those steps, that is a possibility. You can always pull from that bank refrigerant. Great. So that is refrigerant storage. So we're talking about the cylinders and the bank management.